Mario Kart is a pretty large series, bet you couldn't have figured that one out on your own. For every one GameCube there are 3 Mario Kart 8 Deluxes, for every Wii there's 5. Since a lot of people have played Mario Kart, that means a lot of them are bound to have opinions which oppose mine. Probably doesn't help that most of mine are really fucking weird. And due to me being an obnoxious person, this travesty of people having differing takes to mine is something I must voice. So here's the most overrated track in every Mario Kart. But you may have one question. What counts as overrated? Everyone seems to have their own definition of what overrated means, so I'll give mine. Also known as the Google definition. Something that is rated or valued too highly. Think of this as basically a negative Mario Kart hot takes compilation. Tracks the community likes that I don't. But do keep in mind, the most overrated track to me is not always the one I simply dislike the most. If I dislike a track but I don't really have a compelling reason for it, then it's not really overrated, is it? Also that'd be boring to watch. Anyways, we'll be going in chronological order, starting with Super Mario Kart. As one of the few people who likes Super Mario Kart, as in likes Super Mario Kart, but not like likes Super Mario Kart, I think it's fair to say the weakest part of the game is probably the track selection. Half the tracks in this game are bloody squares, meanwhile it's the circuit track they gave all the sauce to. Thanks to most of the tracks being pretty inadequate, narrowing down which track was the most overrated was also pretty hard. On one hand, we have stuff like Vanilla Lake 1, which I don't like, but everyone else doesn't like it either. On the other hand, we have the tracks people do like, but that basically just amounts to Mario Circuit 2 and Rainbow Road, which I also like. So after being stuck for a while, my first thought was maybe Koopa Beach 1, however I feel like the only reason anyone would like that map is because the baby game is too hard to control for them, and that track is pretty wide. Other than that, the water makes the track too slow and there's not a lot going on. I doubt many people who have gotten a good grasp of the controls would disagree with that. Eventually though, I did land on what I was looking for, and I'm more surprised that this wasn't my initial idea. Bowser Castle 3 has plenty of ideas, but unfortunately none of them quite land. To be fair, that trait isn't exactly a rarity with this game, but I digress. Although BC3 isn't quite as popular as MC2 or Rainbow Road, in the modern day, I generally tend to see BC3 as one of the more liked Super Nintendo tracks, even in its original game. BC3 has 3 main features about it: split paths, narrow roads, and the thwomps, all of which fall flat. The split paths suffer from the main thing most split path themed tracks suffer from, being that one path is obviously faster in each section. Particularly in the first section, I think the idea is since the item boxes in Super don't regenerate, you're meant to take the slower paths in order to still be able to acquire items, but the problem is that most of the items in Super are trash, so there's no point going out of your way for them anyway. Despite this, my main problem actually comes from the narrow paths. Compared to future games, even Super Circuit, Super has very slippery controls which don't mesh at all with tight corridors. Getting through them would be manageable enough if this was just a generic driving simulator. However, hazards such as the thwomps can cover up the entire road, making it literally impossible to get through. Occasionally, even when you can get through, it pretty much just comes down to luck, praying that the side you're on happens to be correct. In some cases, it feels like there was nothing I could do, and that isn't particularly enjoyable. For as much slack as I'm giving it, Bowser Castle 3 isn't entirely horrible. I at least think the section with tons of jumps ain't half bad, simply because I like the jumps, but I wouldn't call this track a good either. Moving on, Mario Kart 64. Almost every track in 64 could be considered overrated, but if we ignore the 40-year-olds for a moment, I think I have a clear choice for which track is the most overrated. That track being Kalimari Desert. My friend Sashimi gonna be looking like this now that I'm hating on Kalimari. What you're seeing on screen right now is an empty red desert that's quaking in its boots at the thought of sharp turns. The majority of the gameplay here is exclusively pitiful soft turns where you can't even drift them. With that description alone, you may assume that this track is shit. And well, yeah, it is, but the psychopaths of this world will try and convince you that the train cures Kalimari Desert from any flaw. Now, I know I'm autistic, so I'm legally obliged to like the train, but you got some competition. Kalimari uses the train to make you stop for like 4 seconds straight and completely halt the pacing of the race. I mean, it's funny the first time, but that's about it. 64 has other stupider BS that actually retains its charm over time, whilst also adding to the gameplay. The Kalimari train is just kind of a mild inconvenience, and that's about it, not really impacting what is, once again, an empty flat desert. Also, sometimes the train doesn't even show up. At least using the golden shrooms, which are really common in 64 for some reason, through all the sand is satisfying, but that's about it. Don't listen to Nathaniel Bandy and his 64 propaganda. The Kalimari hype is not real. Worry not, I've already booked him first class in the retirement center. Anyways, moving on to a game that's actually good, Super Circuit. Surprisingly, out of every Mario Kart, I'd probably say Super Circuit has the most consistent track selection. They're almost all pretty fun. However, despite this, most people just tend to judge the tracks based on which has the flashiest background. You lazy dolts. So with that in mind, from both a visual and layout perspective, I fail to see how Sunset Wilds is worthy of like an S tier, let alone any sort of cult following. Sunset Wild shows a similar aesthetic to Kalimari Desert, a red desert at sunset with some rocks in the background, except these ones have a more identifiable shape to them. So clearly I'm just red desert racist? No. Maybe a little. Look, quite a while back, I had a very, very major exam, and in it, they asked me to write about a picture they presented, and it was of a red desert. However, since the printing quality was pretty bad, and I'm a slight little bit red-green colorblind, fun fact for those who didn't know, I guess, now you know, I saw the red desert as a bunch of brown dirt. So I wrote like 3 highly descriptive pages over dirt. So yeah, I have trauma. I did well on that test somehow. Anyway, back on topic. The main differentiator thematically from Dirtamari Desert is advertised in the name, the sunset. Here, every time a lap progresses, the sun drops further, eventually going all the way to nighttime. It's quite cool. However, this is usually all people talk about in regards to Sunset Wilds when Lakeside Park is literally right there. Lakeside has a similar gimmick, except instead of going to nighttime, the volcano erupts and the sky gets far darker. Obviously this is up to personal preference, but I think the volcano disaster is way cooler, mainly because it relates more to the hazards of the track, being the falling rocks. Now regarding the part of Super Circuit nobody actually talks about, the track layouts. Sunset Wilds isn't really remarkable in any sense of the word. It's fun. I like how they use boost panels in many areas. In particular, the part where you have to chain several boosts together whilst also avoiding the Shy Guy tents is gratifying to nail. But several sections just have nothing going on, and compared to the best track layouts in the game, like the aforementioned Lakeside Park, with it having some very flashy shortcuts and a little troll jump that sends you backwards, Sunset Wilds just doesn't hold a candle. Even as a track that focuses on boost panels, Ribbon Road easily beats it. Once again, Sunset Wilds is certainly well made. I do like Sunset Wilds. I just like it nowhere near as much as everyone else. Next up, Double Dash, where duos come and duos die. I sure do die a lot. Mario and Luigi, Peach and Daisy, Yoshi and Birdo, Pearl and Marina. Marinada, my queen. They should have done it, they had no excuse. And you know, whilst we're at it, I've already covered all the Double Dash tracks in a previous video, so I'll keep my explanation shorter than the others in this video. Although, I'm not going to be a complete loser and not give you one at all. I'm not that lazy. With that said, in that video, I recall saying DK Mountain was the most overrated Double Dash track, which is a statement I'm now going to retract. Even if it is very overrated in my eyes, I think the track I've now switched over to is Waluigi Stadium. This is a stadium map themed off large jumps in a game where air movement is locked horizontally the moment you leave the ground. What this means is that you can't move at all once you're airborne, and you're very frequently airborne in this stage. Whilst I could see some people liking this due to it creating a challenge about aligning your jumps beforehand, I just find it to kill the flow a little bit and be a little clunky feeling. Other than that, the color scheme is very drab and gross to me. It certainly looks a lot better in 8. The future games overall did wonders for Waluigi Stadium, to be honest. I'd say it's probably one of the tracks most benefited by its remakes. For example, the straightaway with the cardboard piranha plants was neat on Double Dash. They were decent enough hazards, but with the addition of half pipes and Wii, that section now became a highlight. Waluigi Stadium is definitely a track where my views are going to be slightly tainted by the existence of future versions. But at the same time, I really don't see what this original version has to where tons of people like it so much. I will say though, D tier in my ranking video was very harsh. I'd certainly raise it up to a C tier. Now it's time for DS. 2 screens, half the fun. I don't like DS very much. My main problem is the item system and how it lacks any sort of chaos, excluding the occasional blue shell. It makes DS the most boring game in the series to return to. So what if I told you this was my first Mario Kart? May shock you with how critical I am of it. When it comes to which tracks are the most overrated, my detestment for DS certainly makes this a hard decision to me in a different way from the average person. Whilst you may be struggling to hold it in around this game's track selection, I'm simply wondering and thinking, what the hell is this shit? Keep in mind, I'm not going to be including any of the retros going forward, not like DS has a retro worth picking. After setting that rule in place, I pondered about it logically and started to consider, Airship Fortress. This is a track with stellar theming that I really wish I liked more. Being a track based on the airship levels from Mario 3, naturally its main appeal is the immense amount of hazards it has. Unfortunately, I find all the hazards to be too simplistic and easy to dodge. Granted, I may just be too much of an epic pro Chadley gamer. However, I think the problem stems more from the track itself, as in quite literally the road. I think it's too wide for hazards which ultimately take up very little of it. Like, look here, I'm driving down this giant ass straightaway and I'm barely even having to move at all to avoid the obstacles. This isn't a rare occurrence, this is freakishly common on the DS version. Future games did end up fixing this by giving you more reasons to go near the hazards, such as letting you trick off rocky wrenches or tempting you with coins and grind rails to go nearer to the obstacles. But I'm not talking about those, I'm talking about the DS version, which doesn't have anything to make you want to take those kinds of risks. Due to this, I don't like Airship Fortress in its original incarnation. However, I'm not going to pick Airship Fortress for this video. I think with how atypical my stance on Airship is compared to most people, it doesn't really fall under the category of overrated. It falls under the category of what on earth is wrong with you, NotShyGal. Anyways, my actual pick, for real this time, is Luigi's Mansion. Set in the iconic mansion from the game of the same name, this stage aims to be a faithful love letter to the original. But I'd honestly say the parts where it strays away from its inspirations are where it shines. To be specific, the latter half of the map has you first go through a graveyard with plenty of turns that actually take a bit of effort to nail, and the second has you traverse through a swamp area with reduced traction whenever you enter the massive pool of mud. During all this, you also have to simultaneously avoid walking trees, which thanks to the aforementioned weaker control, the trees actually serve a little bit of a threat. I love this, it's such a unique challenge that you don't really see on many other tracks. So if everything's great so far, what about the track's namesake, the mansion? It's just a couple really long, drawn-out straight lines, and that's about it. Although I'm sure the nostalgic GameCube kids were bawling at their screens at the sight of this riveting gameplay, so I don't know, what does my opinion matter? In all honesty, I think Luigi's Mansion would have been a much cooler track if they rid of the Luigi's Mansion entirely. Instead of the opening being nothing more than a fun reference with not much else of substance, make this be a Haunted Forest themed track, with the beginning instead focusing on the mud you'll later see in the swamp section. As it is now, Luigi's Mansion feels like a track without focus, where only half of it is fantastic but lacks correlation to the main theme. I can't really blame the track for going with the Luigi's Mansion reference though, because it did win over the hearts of many, even if, in my opinion, the consequences led to a track that ended off worse for it. Before we continue forth to Wii, I'd first like to embark on an intermission over to the arcade games. Arcades are the place you go when you feel like making terrible financial decisions, and Mario Kart is no different. Even if the arcade games don't get frequently spoken about, I still was able to conjure together two tracks, one for GP and one for GPDX, which I think could barely somewhat qualify as overrated. So after replaying GP on my arcade cabinet that I own in my house, I landed on Rainbow Downhill for the first game. Rainbow Downhill is the second of two Rainbow Road variations that this game has, and I'd easily say it's the worst of the two. Why? 6 back-to-back U-turns. What the fuck is this? I guess it fits as one last final challenge, but I'd say it's more like poorly thought out artificial difficulty. I do like the part that's in the space station type area because of the ledges you can hop onto to save some time, but this exact section is also present in Rainbow Coaster, which is an actual well-made track. For GPDX, I present Bondance Street. As you can tell from the minimap, this track is shaped like a small oval. So kind of like Baby Park, right? Except you have like 10 billion options for items? Wrong. The arcade games may be a little infamous for their large array of items, but what you may not know is that you're only able to have 3 randomly chosen items in your item distribution during any race. So let's say you were given a banana, a star equivalent that doesn't provide a speed boost, and basically just a shield. Then you have no way of catching back up! I guess you could say the same about almost any of the tracks in this game, but at least they have a very diverse range of visuals, meanwhile the short length of Bondance Street confines the track to one small area. That's already explored in the superior Omatsuri circuit, making Bondance Street kinda redundant. Now that we've done that, let's get back on track. Mario Kart Wii. We are Charlie Kirk. This entry in the series is well regarded for having a phenomenal lineup of tracks, and I'm not going to be the one to oppose that. Honestly, out of every viable candidate, it's very hard to pick a track simply because I like them all. But if I had to pick one, then I think it's quite ironic that I chose the most popular one.
You just got Coconut Mold.
Coconut Mold's a fun track, but lord you guys like it too much. Out of all the tracks I've talked about so far, Coconut Mold committed by far the biggest crime of having an annoying meme. You just got Coconut Mold. You just got Waluigi Pinball. You just got Funky Kong. You just got Blueberried. You just got Marina Edud. I'd want to get Marina Edud. In all fairness, Coconut Mold makes sense to be the star track of Wii. It's a very unique idea, and the track is fun to play. But at the same time, you guys put in like quadruple S tier. I'd simply put in like A. Main reason is because I think the middle of the track could make better use of the theme, whilst the rest of the track has some cool hazards which thematically fit with the idea of a mall. All this section has is a couple of palm trees. You make a shopping mall themed track, yet the only time you go through a shop is for an optional shortcut. Why can't I enter Greg's? Let me grind on the sausage rolls. What are you doing, Nintendo? Also, the metal stairs look tacked on. Coconut Mold is probably my favourite of all the tracks I'm covering today. The parking lot section will be brought down in history as one of God's greatest gifts, and it's no secret as for why. But the middle of the track being nothing more than neat keeps Coconut Mold from being truly cinema for me. After that is Mario Kart 7. The game was released in the early 2010s, not only around the time of the retro craze. Don't you guys just love the Tanuki suit? I know I do. But also near the end of the Wii era. Due to this, Nintendo decided it would be a fun idea to pander to the Wii fans in this entry by including numerous Galaxy references. However, that wasn't the only game they pandered to. My pick for 7 is Woohoo Loop. This is one of 2 tracks based on Woohoo Island from Wii Sports Resort. Wii Sports? Oh my god, the Miis! The Miis! Nintendo, the Miis! Even if I think you guys are too into the Miis, and I heavily judge you all for it, I would call myself quite the Mii-making connoisseur, a master at my craft, and I got proof! May I present the latest and greatest in the Miiverse, Charles! I know, aren't I such a Mii pro? I'm going to be completely honest, I don't really care too much for the Wii series. I have played Resort at a friend's house. If you're curious for a quick review of what I've played, the sword fighting was surprisingly fun, the plane stuff felt a bit pointless, but I see the appeal, and the cycling was pretty bad. Despite my fairly mixed stance on Wii Sports, one of the Woohoo tracks 7 added, being Maka Woohoo, is actually one I find to be very good. Maka Woohoo has you ascending up Woohoo Island from Wii Sports Resort. You start off at the very bottom, but after going through bottomless caves, large lakes, and eventually a treacherous cliffside, you reach the final glider, which sends you into the gorgeous sunset back down to ground level. This is great use of the new section track archetype 7 introduced, presenting you with a wonderful journey mixed with compelling track design and a reference for those who care. The same could not be said for Woohoo Loop. This is also a section track set on Woohoo Island, where the big difference is that instead of climbing around the volcano, you drive around the island in a big circle. And instead of doing cool stuff with tons of spectacle, you drive around a bunch of roads. Not just any road, flat road. And not just any flat road. Flat road with tons of really soft turns. Woohoo Loop's layout is really boring. It's just a bunch of flat road for most of it, and the track ends very anticlimactically with it just being more road, some grass, a car or two, and it's slightly tilted downwards. Ooh, spicy. When it comes to making a section track, there are 2 key things that you need to get right: variety and spectacle. Variety, because you've got to justify the extra stuff. And spectacle, because if these tracks are going to be long, intense journeys, then it should be ended like one. Maka Woohoo has that in spades, but the closest Woohoo Loop has to variety is those 2 optional gliding sections. One being nice to look at, but completely void of anything else, and the other being ridiculously slow, out of the way, and never worth your time. And in terms of spectacle, while outside of the 2 mediocre gliding sections, there isn't really any, because as I've already mentioned a billion times, the track is entirely just a flat road. Whilst it's cool they based the track on one of the cycling routes from Wii Sports, Woohoo Loop has nothing else to its name that's really worth much praise. When Maka Woohoo is already in 7, Woohoo Loop's addition feels completely pointless, and despite Maka Woohoo being able to stand on its own, reference put aside, Woohoo Loop simply cannot. Next up,
Mario Kart! Hey!
It's finally dead! After getting DLC, getting more DLC, getting even more DLC, getting a deluxe version, getting some pointless cosmetic update, getting 6 more waves of DLC, Mario Kart 8 is gone! Although I'm still having to go back to it for this video, so I guess it never leaves. If we were in the worst timeline, deciding which track is the most overrated would be quite hard due to there being 96 tracks. But remember, I'm not including any of the retros, and that's 95% of the track roster after the BCP. So that just leaves 25 options for what I could pick, and I knew immediately which track to go for. Mount Wario is probably the most iconic track from 8, but to me, it's not one I'd put in my top 5. However, let's first go over what I'm fond of. Lap 1 is fantastic, even if a little short. The curvy road, combined with the ice, makes for a unique area to drift through, and elements such as the numerous split paths where you can either go wide for coins or stay in tight for the faster line, blend together wonderfully. To top it all off, there's also that leap of faith shroomless cut near the end of Lap 1 that is very thrilling to take. Lap 2 is also good, with a large range of set pieces where none of them really fall flat. I particularly like the snowy forest, where numerous split paths, the stray fallen logs, and the scattered trees combine to create an ending that is extremely chaotic. Where my complaints start to arise is when you cross that finish line for the second time. Lap 3 takes place entirely within the ski slope, and whilst most of Mount Wario so far has been a barrage of unique ideas, each delivering diverse types of gameplay, Lap 3's ski slope is the most standard and boring to play through. To give it some credit, the start does have some tricky turns, even if they feel like they kinda come out of nowhere, but after is a worse version of the bumps from DK's Summit, and that's it. The rest of the track is pretty much just driving completely straight. I get that the entire final sequence is meant to be one large spectacle, a sign that you conquered the mountain. But that doesn't mean the last stretch has to be around 10 complete seconds of doing nothing. After all, if we go back to a track we talked about previously, Makawoohoo, their final spectacle-driven segment may similarly be a simple glider down to the bottom, but their section also features an alternate harder path if you swoop down low, adding a risk-reward element to this part of the track. Mount Wario's has nothing going on, aside from some rings and boosts, which are so close to each other that they might as well be in a perfect straight line. Ironically enough, the part of Mount Wario that is meant to wow the player, alongside the rest of Lap 3, is what stopped Mount Wario from truly wowing me, even if I still like Mount Wario. Before we go to Mario Kart World, I'd like to take one last side mission to another game in the series not frequently talked about, Mario Kart Tour. But not Shy Guy, why would you talk about the mobile game? Because I treat all the Mario Karts equally, regardless of any $40 Diddy Kongs. Except for that one, because that one's a toy. And except for that one, because that one fucking sucks. The issue with doing Tour for something like this is that nobody ever talks about this game anymore, and even when they do, there isn't much discourse over the nitros. Much like the arcade games, we're gonna have to add an asterisk to this one. Singapore Speedway 2 is half spectacle and half sauce, exceeding in neither. For those who aren't Tour-pilled, in 8 Deluxe, Singapore 2 is the end of the second lap and the start of the third. Whilst in that game, it works great as a transition into the final bombastic gliding section, as a standalone track, it feels underwhelming and awkward. The big money shot is shoved at the start of the lap instead of being at the end like it is in 8. The conveyor section, whilst fun, feels too isolated, once again feeling more fitting as a transition area to something bigger, and the ending to the track being the tunnel, whilst pretty, doesn't offer anything interesting in terms of gameplay, leading to that ending feeling lacking. Singapore 2 ain't bad by any means, my complaints do mostly just lie within the graphics. Sounding like a Pokemon fan right now. The buildings, where's Mega Singapore? The thing is though, is that Singapore Speedway tracks usually have an immaculate atmosphere, even in Tour, so it results in Singapore 2 not living up to what I was hoping it would be. Finally, we reach Mario Kart World. Who's going to be the Mario Kart killer? I believe in best game Tray Racers to be the Mario Kart killer. It will kill it in cold blood. Just you wait, Mario Kart chuds. Your time is up. Anyways, I think you guys have probably heard enough yapping about World from other YouTubers, so I'll just get right into it. The most overrated track in Mario Kart World is Great Question Block Ruins. This map has a lot to like, but also has some stuff which I'm not too into. Starting with the good though, the idea is really cool. A Sky Ruins track is a really creative concept, and to theme it off of a question block makes perfect sense. I also really like that viral shortcut where you trick off the side of the ring, ride the wall, and trick back to safety. It's very satisfying to pull off. Same thing goes for the inner a rail strat on the second turn. At the same time though, whilst the shortcuts on Question Block Ruins are fun to mess around with, the track itself isn't one I usually want to play in proper races. This is because of the free U-turns that the track has. Whilst U-turns are perfectly fine for time trials, in actual races, especially in World, you need to be very careful with them. This is because with how sharply you need to turn for them, getting hit with items is 10 times more devastating. And in World, it takes like 12 years to turn around after getting hit. This is in contrast to the rest of the game, where recovery after getting hit by an item is quite quick and snappy, which is how I prefer it to be. Down but then right back up. Keep in mind as well, there's 24 players, slipstreams, bumping. It leads to the abundance of U-turns feeling like a mess that's far too chaotic. And one of the U-turns is right at the very end after the big shortcut, so you can imagine how fun losing a race because of that is. I can perfectly understand if you don't mind this aspect of the track, because bro, it's Mario Kart. But for me, it hurts the track a ton and makes any sort of missteps feel way too punishing, in a way that's a bit frustrating. That's all from me though. Now it's your turn. What do you think is the most overrated Mario Kart track? Let me know down below. I love reading your comments. Unless it's from Sashimi, then it sucks and it's bad and it's crap. Also, whilst you're at it, maybe a like and a sub too. For the jolly Christmas season, Christmas was yesterday. Do it anyway. Okay, bye.